December 31st, 1944, New Year's Eve. For most, it's a time of celebration. But for the crews of the U.S. 8th Air Force, it was just another day at the office situated 5 miles above a war-torn Europe. On this day, a mission was launched that would become one of the most unbelievable stories of survival in aviation history. The target was the oil refineries in Hamburg, Germany, a vital artery for the Nazi war machine. Among the hundreds of B-17 flying fortresses lumbering into the sky were 2 bombers from the 398th Bomb Group. The Little Skipper, piloted by Lieutenant Charles "Slats" Rojon, and 9 Lives, captained by Lieutenant William "Happy" Leake. Both were seasoned crews, having faced the terrors of the European skies time and again. But nothing could have prepared them for what was about to happen. The air over Hamburg was a storm of steel. German anti-aircraft guns, the infamous flak, painted the sky with black puffs of death. Each explosion sent shrapnel ripping through the air, capable of tearing a bomber apart. As if that wasn't enough, Luftwaffe fighters swarmed the formation like angry hornets. The American gunners fought back, there, 50 caliber machine guns chattering, filling the air with tracers. The mission was already a brutal, chaotic fight for survival. The bombers dropped their payload, turning the refineries below into a cauldron of fire and smoke. Their job done, they began the long, perilous journey back to their base in England. But for the Little Skipper and 9 Lives, the greatest danger was yet to come. As the formation wheeled around for home, a stray flak burst rocked the sky. The explosion struck the B-17, flying directly above the Little Skipper, sending it into a fatal dive. Below, Lieutenant Rojon instinctively pushed his controls forward to avoid the falling bomber. But in the tight, unforgiving sky of a combat box, one move creates a domino effect. At the exact same moment, Lieutenant Leake, piloting 9 Lives directly below, was forced to climb to avoid another aircraft. At 19,000 feet, in a split second that seemed to stretch into eternity, their 2 worlds collided. The impact was catastrophic. 9 Lives slammed into the belly of the Little Skipper, its top turret and cockpit canopy shattering as it wedged itself underneath. The number 2 engine of the Little Skipper sliced into the top of 9 Lives, while its ball turret was sheared clean off, a gaping hole left in its place. The 2 10-ton bombers were now fused together, a monstrous, horrifying chimera of metal and men, locked in an embrace that defied all laws of aerodynamics. They were stuck, as one survivor would later describe, like mating dragonflies. Inside the Little Skipper, the collision was a violent earthquake. The floor buckled, instruments shattered, and the plane lurched violently. Pilot Charles Rojon and his co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Robert Slagle, fought desperately with their controls. The yoke was useless, jammed solid. The bomber was now a runaway train, falling out of the sky in a terrifying, uncontrolled dive. From his cockpit in 9 Lives, William Leake faced the same nightmare. His controls were also frozen, and his view was completely obstructed by the belly of the bomber on top of him. 2 planes, 2 pilots, one shared destiny, plummeting towards the earth at an alarming rate. Panic and confusion reigned inside both aircraft. But amidst the chaos, training and courage took over. The crews knew they had to bail out, but there was a problem. In the Little Skipper, the bombardier, Sergeant Joe Russo, was trapped in the mangled nose of the aircraft. The escape hatch was blocked, twisted shut by the impact. His crewmates, radio operator George Abbott and navigator Alan D. Strang, refused to leave him. They grabbed fire axes and anything they could find, desperately hacking and prying at the bent metal, trying to free their friend as the combined wreckage spiraled downwards. Every second counted. Meanwhile, a miracle was happening. Somehow, against all odds, Rojon in the top plane and Leake in the bottom plane began to regain a sliver of control. By coordinating their efforts shouting commands that were never Heard but instinctively understood, they found that by using their engine throttles, they could influence the direction of the two-plane mass. It was an astonishing feat of airmanship. They managed to pull the locked bombers out of the spin and level them off, slowing their descent. They were actually flying this impossible machine. Their primary goal now was to steer the wreckage away from German-held territory and towards the Allied lines in Belgium. They were buying precious time for their crews to escape. A bailout order was given. One by one, crewmen from both bombers began to jump, their parachutes blossoming against the cold winter sky. In The Little Skipper, the efforts to free Joe Russo were failing. With the ground rushing up and time running out, the navigator and radio operator were finally forced to jump, a heart-wrenching decision to save themselves. They had done everything they could. Only 3 men now remained in The Little Skipper: the pilot Rojan, his co-pilot Slagle, and the trapped bombardier Russo. In 9 lives, the situation was just as dire. The co-pilot, flight engineer, and navigator managed to bail out through the mangled escape hatches. But Captain Leake remained at his post, fighting the controls, determined to give his crew every possible chance. As the last of his able crewmen jumped, he finally prepared to abandon his aircraft. He scrambled from his seat, but as he did, his parachute harness snagged on a piece of wreckage. For a horrifying moment, it seemed he was trapped. With a final desperate wrench, he tore himself free and leaped into the void. Back in The Little Skipper, Rojan knew their time was up. He and his co-pilot Slagle prepared to jump. Slagle went first, tumbling out of the pilot's side window. Rojan was next. As he made his way out, he looked back one last time at the trapped bombardier, Joe Russo, a silent, tragic farewell. He then pushed himself away from the doomed aircraft and into the wind. Now, only 1 man remained in the sky with the 2 locked bombers: Joe Russo, still trapped in the nose. The planes, now pilotless, continued their slow, stable glide towards the ground. They crossed over the Allied lines and finally came down in a field in Belgium. The impact was surprisingly gentle. The Little Skipper skidded to a halt. But 9 lives, pinned beneath it and filled with fuel vapor, erupted into a massive fireball. The explosion tore the 2 planes apart, finally separating them on the ground. Tragically, Sergeant Joe Russo did not survive the crash. He was the only fatality from the crew of The Little Skipper. The crew of 9 lives was not so fortunate. Of the 9 men aboard, only 4 survived the bailout and the ensuing chaos. Captain William Leake, after his harrowing escape, landed safely. But 5 of his crewmates were lost, either during the collision or the bailout. In total, from the 18 men who took off that morning on 2 separate planes, 10 miraculously survived this unbelievable ordeal. The survivors were scattered across the Belgian countryside. They were picked up by Allied soldiers and local villagers, each with an incredible story to tell. When they were debriefed, their commanders could hardly believe what they were hearing. 2 B-17s, locked together, flying for miles under partial control? It sounded impossible. But the wreckage, lying in a Belgian field, was undeniable proof. The story of The Little Skipper and 9 lives is more than just a bizarre aviation anomaly. It is a profound testament to the courage, skill, and sheer will to survive of the young men who flew these dangerous missions. It's a story of pilots like Charles Rojan and William Leake, who, faced with an impossible situation, refused to give up and flew the unflyable. It's a story of crewmates like George Abbott and Alan Strong, who risked their own lives to save a trapped friend. And it is a solemn reminder of the sacrifice of the 8 men who did not come home that day, including Sergeant Joe Russo. Their bravery and the miraculous survival of their 10 comrades remains one of the most astonishing chapters in the history of air combat. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as incredible as we did, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of history and heroism.